Welcome, YouTube users. This is Blowing Smoke with Twisted Rico. I'm your host, Steve Riccardo. If you want to hear the entire show with intros, outros, and music, please go to Apple, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, etc. Very excited. Please welcome to the show Jaime Sciarappa and Chris Foley, the outstanding rhythm section of SS Decontrol.
Hello,
Hey,
hello.
how you doing?
What's going on, man?
I talked to Jaime about coming back on the show because, believe it or not, Chris, this is his third time on the show.
Third time.
Holy
Wow,
shit, that's right.
three-timer.
He was
Yeah.
on with Al
Yep.
about a year and a half ago, and then the long wait, the whole band except for Glenn came
Yep.
on, and now he's returned.
Here I am again.
Man.
This might be the last one of these I do. I'm a little burnt out on podcasts and such. I feel like I'm just saying the same shit over and over and over again, but I'm
Well,
sure
Al,
you'll
for
go a
four-
different road.
What were we going
For
to say,
40
Chris?
years, yeah. I mean, yeah, we've been telling this story for a little while, but you know, it tends to look a little different when you move on in time a little bit, you know what I mean? So
True.
it's good to get different input.
That is
Yeah,
true.
the story is definitely taking on a life that I didn't ever expect it to take on in the last few years.
Nor did
Con-
I.
Congratulations on the reissue of The Kids Will Have Their Say on Trust Records. You guys got to be excited about that.
Yeah,
Oh,
it's been wild, beyond our expectations for sure.
yeah, without a doubt. I mean, I remember getting excited about it, but I never dreamt that it was gonna garner this much interest, or that I didn't know what to expect with Trust Records, and they've just been doing an amazing job. And Joe Nelson's been working it, and I couldn't be happier with what they've been doing, and they've been surprising me all the time,
Yeah.
which has been great.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, quite honestly, Al and I had many conversations over the years about, re-releasing this stuff. And my belief was always, people that wanted it already had it. I didn't really think there would be that much interest. So I'm pretty shocked by the response.
Well, I saw what Joe and those guys did with Circle Jerks and 7 Seconds. So they just, you guys coming along now after those two is really good because they've already tested the market and like the market's there. It's a big market. I wanted to talk to Chris a little bit because we got a little bit of your story, Jaime, on the early days. And I'm just wondering, Chris, were you like part of the whole Boston crew thing, or were you just a drummer in the band? Because you don't seem like the type of guy to me that would be part of a crew like that. Were you? And how did you meet?
I met them actually through an ad in the Boston Phoenix. So at that point, they were looking for a drummer, and I had a friend explain to me. I knew who Dead Kennedys were, but I didn't know who MT was, and he explained it was Minor Threat, and a good friend of mine was a DJ at the time, and he was like, "Yeah, you got to check this out. This is what's happening." That's 1981. And so I had been trying to venture out of my hometown. I was 16 at the time. I was getting out of the heavy metal bands. I wanted to try something new. I wanted to get out of Wellesley. I wanted to go into Boston, and that's where this opportunity came up. And I was saying something the other day, because I walked into a room where it was obvious I was kind of the only one who had musical experience, but there was something happening. There was a buzz in the room, and definitely something I wanted to get involved with. But my dad drove me to that first tryout or practice. I couldn't drive; I was too young. I was still in high school, and I had to catch the T home a lot of times. So I did miss some of the events in town, and mainly just because I didn't live in town, and I was a few years younger. So yeah, especially looking back now, people are like, well, what were you doing with them? You know what I mean? And it's true, I don't look particularly hardcore, but you know, I could play some drums, you know, I could
Yes,
play some
Good.
drums.
you sure can. And I didn't mean it that way when I said it. I
No, no.
meant more of like the crew hanging out and all that. So I think Al might have been talking about you when we did the interview about we had guys that had to take the train and come from a long ways away. He was talking about you basically.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Springer had to do it as well, but I mean, I rode my bike to the T, took the T to the Orange Line, took the Orange Line out to Wellington. Jamie picked me up, then we drove to Al's place for rehearsal. So yeah, you're probably talking like 4 hours commuting time. But again, I was 16, I was in a cool band that was playing in Boston. I was like, yeah, having the time of my life. So I really didn't mind it, you know?
Jamie, what was the chemistry like when Chris came in and started playing with you guys, since you guys put the ad out there for a drummer?
Yeah, it's funny. I don't remember a lot about the details though, but I do remember that first practice, him pulling up. My parents' garage was where we had our first practice, and just thinking, wow, this kid's really good, man. I didn't, there was no question he was going to be the drummer of the band if he wanted to do it. But yeah, Springer tells the funny story of seeing his drums and thinking, oh man, that looks like a jazz kit. Like, what's this guy going to be like? And then he starts playing. We're like, oh shit, he can play. Because believe me, we could not. Like you said, there was only one talented musician in the band, and that was Chris, until Francois came along.
So Chris, did they have songs and stuff together when you got there and say, this is what we want to do? Or how did that all work out?
Um, I'm not sure that Al had any completely formed ideas. I definitely remember the first thing we did was play the song "Decontrol" by Discharge, um, and that was,
Yeah.
I think, simple enough for us to get a hold of and actually play through. Um, and then Al may have introduced a couple of ideas, um, and again, it was so coming from such a different angle for me. Usually it'd be like, oh, I just learned this song off of this record and you play. But when somebody's writing songs, you got to pick up where they're coming from. That first day, I didn't necessarily know exactly where he was coming from, but I totally just like unhinged myself from all my musical past and just tried to go with it, basically. Um,
What was your past? I mean, what were you listening to and what were you playing? When did you start playing drums?
Oh, I started, as a little kid and did band in school, and my first band was called Lorelei, and we played at Natick High School, and I remember a chair got thrown through a window, and it was just the principal was freaking out. It was awesome. It was great. I loved it.
Was
Um,
that from the Stick song that you got the name, Lorelei?
no, no, I don't know. It was a siren song or something. I don't know where we came up with the silly name, but we were doing Aerosmith and Jimi Hendrix and Robin Trower and all kinds of like metal and stuff like that. I mean, remember at that point it was like 79. So Hendrix was only 10 years before that. It's kind
Yeah.
of freaky to think about that, but um, I was definitely ready to move on, and to me, a lot of the music at the time, and even the vibe, um, you know, people that you talk a lot more about the straight edge thing and what that meant, and the vibe in playing in a band at that particular time really was about partying and rock and roll and partying and staying out all night and all that stuff, and I remember being like, okay, I'm all set with this. Like people started dressing up in the heavy metal stuff, and I was like, it's not working for me. So taking a different approach, it was just fresh. It was like new. Okay, I'll try doing this. And again, Al wouldn't express himself in musical terms. It would just be like, it goes, that's basically how he would go, and we'd figure it out from there.
Was
Um,
there a straight edge code in place for you when you got
no,
there, or did you?
no, 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 no. Oh, geez, can I tell the story? I don't know. I remember there was an early practice where a friend of Al's that he brought along to practice, lit up a doobie, and I remember taking it and offering it to Al, and he was like, "No, I'm not into that. Don't do that." And that I remember that ride home. Actually, we had a long discussion because it was like, "Chris, what are you going to go do?" I was like, "Oh, I'll probably go smoke some weed and hang out, and listen to some music or something like that." And that's when the discussions happened about, well, why? Do you need to do that? Or, I kind of want this band to not be that way. And I actually, that was refreshing for me, believe it or not, at 16, because I was a weekend binge drinker at that point in time. And it was the party world. And I was definitely like turning off from that and turning off from your typical high school life at that point in 81. So, people ask me about the straight edge thing, and me, straight edge was a conversation. It was a conversation I had with Al about, you know, how to live your life, and how to feel good about the way you live your life. Let's face it, any of those rock stars who live that life, as sooner or later, at some point, have to come down from the high. So some of this was like, no, we're going to be so intense that there will be no drugs. You won't need drugs because this music is going to be so intense and so in your face. I mean, and that, there weren't extreme sports at that time. This is before like extreme became extreme. And I was into it. I definitely wanted to let go of Jimi Hendrix and the whole. I never got into Motley Crue. They were never like, it was not my thing. Like that's when I bailed before metal at that point. Um,
Was
anyways,
this is interesting because you're saying like Al kind of like led you away from all that, like the party kind of direction.
oh, definitely. And then
Wow.
seeing Minor Threat come into the scene and realizing it kind of develop. And Jamie was there. We watched this whole thing kind of develop, and we watched people like object to it and say, oh my god, they're running around beating people up for drinking beers, and we knew that wasn't the case. And then, it being punk rock, then people started mocking the straight edge and making fun of it, and it to me, again, it really was a conversation. It was a conversation about how you want to live your life, and it was definitely a little more altruistic. Al's views. Anybody remember True Values when we did True Values, right?
Yeah.
Hardware, True
Yeah.
Values. So yeah, he definitely led me in that direction, and it was something that you know I wasn't going to play music to party. I was going to play music, and that to me was much more the drive, the
Yeah.
driving force.
What
Yeah.
about you? Go ahead,
I was going
Jamie.
to say it's a similar thing for me, just in that, Al and I used to drink a bit when, before, in the early days. But then I always recall that the time we went to New York to see Black Flag and met all the DC guys. Henry was there, Henry Rollins was there, and a bunch of other guys. Ian was not there for some reason, but they were talking about straight edge and stuff like that. And then I remember Al and I having a conversation driving back from New York. He was driving, I was in the passenger seat, and we both kind of said, let's stop drinking. Like that, we kind of really were impressed with their whole scene. And from that moment on, I think both of us, pretty much stopped, and the straightish thing kind of took hold.
Was it exaggerated in American hardcore when they say that you guys took it to an extreme in terms of the way you didn't allow anyone around you to like partake in that?
Yeah, I think that there's definitely been some embellishment of some of those stories, but I don't remember Al ever saying. Well, maybe he did say it once or twice, but I think just people being around Al knew that he didn't drink and that he wasn't down with that. And I don't ever remember us ever saying no, you can't drink or this or that. It's just that when we hung out together, I don't remember anybody being like fucked up or anything like that. It just wasn't our scene, and just I don't think there was a discussion or any sign of or any sort of demand It just kind of happened. It was sort of a little more organic than what people make it out to be.
Uh,
I think the reaction, it was somewhat of a reaction to the Sid Vicious punk rock thing, which
yeah.
was, drugs, sex and drugs and rock and roll to the extreme. And I always felt like it was somewhat of a reaction to that. Like, we're into punk rock, but we're not going to be that kind of punk rock, you know? And that's where it felt like a bit of a change, and that's where it took on a life of its own, shall we say. And I felt like people were partying around us. There was definitely a lot of drinking and a lot of drugs going on, but it was, like Jamie said, it wasn't in our group of people, the nucleus that we had that operated as a band, that moved in the van, that went to the dressing room or stuff like that. We didn't have partying or drinking was not a part of that, but we kind of cohabitated the hardcore world with a lot of people who were doing drugs,
Sure.
So that's where it's always a little weird to me that people are like, oh, uh, uh, everybody was so extreme about it. Like, I didn't feel like we were in our scene, and it may have taken on a life of its own in other situations and in other scenes where it felt to me like a lot of people got militant with it. And I never felt that we were at all militant about it. Not in our, again, not in the nucleus of people that we had.
You know how perception is, someone will say one thing and you can't drink, you can't smoke, you can't be around. And people, that's how I heard it when I was around. I was going to Framingham State, actually, not pretty close to where you grew up. And
Yeah.
It was like we were partying heavy, man. I was like, kind of like, I don't know, man. I like this music, but I don't know if I want to be around these guys, man. They'll kick the shit out of me. Um,
Yeah,
what,
the other thing, there was kind of famously this little straight edge chant that we did one time when we were in New York, and that, for some reason took on a life of its own. Choke. I remember driving to New York. I think it was we were playing with Minor Threat. I think that was that weekend, and Joe came up with this little chant thing. He said, "Oh, let's do this on stage." And I think we did it like right before we went on to play. And there's a line, "Kill anyone with a bear in the hand." And again, it was all meant tongue in cheek and kind of funny, but people took it a little more serious than it was for sure.
That's what I meant about it. It eventually became a little bit of an in joke with
Yeah,
people, and Choke is the person I think of. I'm not trying to call him out or anything, but I think he was like, oh, let's mess with these people because at this point we can, and that was a little bit of punk rock right there. We're gonna
yeah,
we're gonna fuck with you a little bit.
exactly.
there was that press conference too, you see the highlight of that, and Choke and Alice sitting there like, no
Yeah,
drinking, no smoking.
yeah, yeah. That was real early, man. I can't remember what that exactly was for. Who recorded that?
Somehow someone got a hold of it and it got out into the public. Um, Chris, once you settled in with these guys, do you remember when you first started playing out, what that was like for you?
Um, it was awesome. I mean, I was 16 years old and I was playing at clubs I wasn't even allowed to be in. Well, in rooms that really I felt like I was, sneaking in. I felt like I was sneaking in. Um, but when I think about it, it started out at the Gallery East and it started out at different venues. And I mean, I thought it was great. It was amazing. I also, in the beginning, things were a little sparse, but I didn't realize when I went on to be in other bands how hard it is to get 100 people in a room or how hard it is to get 200 people in a room. I think I got a bit spoiled with SSD because, you know, I felt like whenever we played, there were people there. And later on in life, I learned that if you're in a band, you actually have to work pretty hard to get people into a club. So I was a little spoiled, and I could run back to my high school and tell everybody about it. And, I dragged some of my friends in, but I was really enjoying getting out of my little suburb there and being in the band and playing. And I remember one night we opened for the Bad Brains at Streets, little club. I don't know if you remember Streets at all. It was only over for like 2 years, but we played with the Bad Brains. They showed up. I remember HR gave me the Pay to Come single, and I still have that. It's probably worth a lot of money. But that I remember playing that gig. My parents let me go to school late the next day because I had been out late. And I remember walking into school, the hallways are empty, everybody's in class. And I'm just like, I'm the fucking coolest kid in this school. You know, I just played with the Bad Brains last night. You know what I mean? And it just, it was part of forming my personality. You know what I mean? It was part of who I became. And, you know, it's kind of fun now, 40 years later, to look back and take a bird's eye view of it, you know, realizing how much that really helped to form who I am and who I became as a musician and everything, you know?
Yeah, I agree with you wholeheartedly, because, you know, SSD was my first band as well. I mean, I learned to play bass like, you know, 2 months before. So in fact, I always tell the story. I originally wanted to be a guitarist, but I took one guitar lesson and thought, oh, this is going to take way too long, man. I want to be in a band tomorrow. So like I took what I learned from that one guitar lesson, applied it to bass, and within like 2 or 3 months, you know, Al and I were connected and doing a band. But what you said about, you know, it forming sort of who you were as a person, that definitely was, you know, a huge part of who I was and who I became. I mean, I'm still the people that were friends of mine, you know, when I was 19 years old in the early 80s. Are the friends that I still have today. And we all still have, you know, very like-minded views on the world and stuff like that. And I think a huge part of it was, you know, the hardcore scene, the punk rock scene, the music scene, just those people in general are still a huge part of my life.
Chris, what are your recollections of when you guys decided to go in the studio and make the Kids Will Have Their Say record?
You know, I've been reminded recently about how kind of scattered the recording was. I had done a little bit of recording before then, but it was definitely a new experience for me. And because it took place in a few different places, Larry Lassade's basement or Oak Grove, and I think my fondest memories are of Radio Beat, where we spent a fair amount of time in Kenmore Square there. You know, to me, it was that's what I wanted to be doing at that time, was making music, making recordings. And you know, as the sound goes, you know, we've kind of often said that we never were successful at capturing the live sound, but I've always looked at a studio as a different beast altogether. And so I've always loved that process. And then, you know, working with somebody like Lou Giordano, who really was a perfectionist. You know, I saw him work later in life with Pro Tools and all that. And that dude, he you know, was all about nailing it and getting it right. But to a certain extent, I was like, okay, you guys, you tell me, did that work out okay? All right, then let's go. Let's do another song, you know. It was really about trying to execute and get it so that everybody could go, okay, I can live with that, you know. But it was really exciting. But you know, I think back and I do remember all the tape machines slowing down at Oak Grove because it was so hot, and getting kicked out of Larry Lassade's basement because his dad didn't want a noise factory in the basement. We spent 4 hours, I remember like 4 hours getting all the drum sounds. We set the guitar amp up. Al strummed one chord, and Larry Lassade's dad comes running down. What do you think this is, a noise factory? And we yanked the power cord right out of the wall. And I just remember being like, okay, this is going to be a fun experience. I think we ended up having to come back.
Yeah, we ended up coming back the next day. I think Larry bought his dad like a ticket to the movies and like a pizza and sent him off. And we recorded the next day. They left all the gear set up, and we came back the next morning.
Yeah, that's right.
There were like 3 sessions altogether on making that record.
Maybe 4. I feel like we did Oak Grove, which was in Malton. That was the very first time we recorded, and that sounded like shit.
I don't think we used anything off that.
Yeah, I don't think it's ever been used. Yeah, we were always, for me, at least I was always like chasing that live sound. We were, I've said many times, we were a live band. You had to see us live. But we heard some of the, the stuff that was coming out of DC, and we thinking, yeah, that sounds kind of cool. And so, we were definitely chasing a sound, which I don't think we ever got. But yeah, we were at Oak Grove. And I feel like we were at Radio Beat, and that didn't work out. Then we went back. Then we went to Larry Lasade's place, and then we were back at Radio Beat. So I don't remember all the details of it, but it was multiple sessions trying to get something that never really came to fruition. I don't think, but it's funny because that's what people are hearing today. And Chris, I think you said how back then it sounded so crazy, but now it's kind of like not so it's kind of tame comparatively. I mean, we've heard it all, over the last 40 years. We've heard some crazy shit come out of the music scene, the various music scenes. So, what we were doing was so cutting edge and so crazy sounding back then, but not so much anymore.
Yeah. Well, I'm finding now that when I play it for people who know nothing about hardcore, they're not necessarily back then, back in 81, and when you played it for people who had no idea, oh my God, they didn't know what to think about it. But, nowadays, somebody can hear it and go, oh yeah, I've heard plenty of music that's kind of like that. You know what I mean? So, although it still has a pretty cool edge to it, I think. And I think Al did a really good job remastering it and got some good low end into it. And I don't know, it's been kind of fun to listen back to it. It's definitely different, that's for sure. Definitely different than most things you listen to,
Before we get to the re-release, the reissue more, what do you think about the development that took place between the Kids Will Have Their Say and Get It Away? And is that part of the deal also? Do you guys know? Is that going to be reissued as well?
Yeah, Get It Away will be coming out in 2024. They're hoping, by like May-ish around there, early spring. It's being worked on right now. I know the album cover is, being worked on. So yeah, that the plan is to have that released as well.
So go ahead.
I was going to say, talking to Joe Nelson about this kind of event that we had, the signing was for various reasons it was going to be much bigger than we originally ended up being, but this next party or whatever happens is going to be a little bit more in line with what we originally had. But we were thinking about playing and stuff like that, but Al's neuropathy isn't allowing that, so we'll see what happens where we are in 6 months or whatever it is.
Interesting. So as far as what I originally was going to ask you, do you think the band developed a lot between the first record and Get It Away? Because I mean, a lot of people will say Glue is like probably the greatest SSD song. I mean I like songs on both records.
Yeah.
Even some of the older stuff. The more metal stuff that Chris probably really loved a lot. That's kind of a joke. Did you feel the band was developing a lot, Chris, at that time?
Yeah, I mean, I think Jamie may feel the same way. I really feel like Get It Away was the record. To me, that was the one where we had the hardcore, 80s hardcore. To me, that's when we kind of perfected this thing that was going on. I mentioned to somebody the other day, you get in that room with Al and Jamie and Springer, and you throw out all the ideas of 12-bar blues or anything to do with traditional song structure. And I think that's what made the music at that time really cool, is that it was so different. Then as musicians, we all learned how to play our instruments, and that's when the metal thing started coming. That's really when people learned how to play their instruments, and all of a sudden it was like, hey, check this out, I can play this Led Zeppelin riff. It's like, oh well, I thought we weren't doing that. Well, we all did. We all dove into that. But I feel like Get It Away still had that like fresh, if you listen to the song structure and the way it was set up, it's still really fresh and different. You know, there are talking points about the next two records that, you know, we've been talking more about with people about that whole transition. Uh, I feel like Get It Away was almost like kids will have their saying "Get It Away." They could be, they were in the same time period, and I feel like Get It Away was almost like yeah, it was our sophomore effort, right? You know what I mean? We weren't so fresh at it anymore, and and it did come across a little stronger, I thought.
And the addition of I'm sorry to cut you off, but the addition of Francois, you know, brought us a whole different dynamic to the band, to the sound of the band. I mean, people have told me, you know, it's funny because when you're in the middle of it all, it's just what you're doing and you don't really maybe appreciate it for what it is. But, you know, friends have told me, man, the first time I heard that, it was like, I had never heard anything like that from a hardcore band. Just the crazy guitar sounds and shit like that. So, yeah, I mean, it was, you know, I don't think it was a conscious effort to change in any way. It just like Chris said, we're just getting a little bit better. We're a little more familiar with you know, how to write songs or whatever. And it just, there was a natural evolution, which continued on, but unfortunately, like as many people said, maybe not so appreciated, you know, the last two records. But it was just a constant development. I think most bands do that, except maybe AC/DC. Their first album is like their last album.
Well,
Before you,
somebody pointed, excuse me, Steve, somebody pointed out to me that uh, the artwork on How We Rock
Yeah.
really kind of set the tone for it. And if we had different artwork, maybe if we had another Pusshead drawing on the cover or something,
You're
I
right.
think people would have thought of it a little differently. But we were really pushing the envelope when we said How We Rock, you know, and I think then people were like, okay, now they've become a rock band, you know, but we were kind of like making fun of it. I mean, I don't think other people got the humor in the cover though. And when you say AC/DC, look at the back of How We Rock,
Yeah.
and then look at For Those About to Rock,
Yeah.
and you will see this a similarity. Because I believe Mr. Burrill said, "Make it look like this album." I'm telling you, just go look it up sometime. You'll see.
You're right about that.
I was one of the really surprised people, I have to say, when I saw you guys at the Olympic Auditorium in May 1984. I wasn't expecting what happened. And, you know, we talked about this before, Jamie, you know, and it was just kind of shocking to me, but I didn't think it was bad. I mean, I was like, oh, okay, these guys are developing and they've got a newer sound. You know, I think a lot of people there were a little bit shocked. And but you guys seem to like deal with that pretty well. Do you remember that show, Chris?
Oh yeah, yeah. I remember getting hit with ice and cups and different things, and getting spit on and such.
The
I
suicidal
remember.
show I'm talking about for the
Yeah.
listeners.
Oh, was that the first LA show that we did? Because I know we did. Didn't we do two in the Olympic?
We did
I,
two at the Olympic. One with Social Distortion. I think that was
that was the second one, I think.
yeah. What year did you say, Steve? The
It was
one
May 1984 that I saw you guys. And, you know, I was surprised that I looked at some old dates and it said that you guys played shows in 85. And I was like, I thought you guys only did one show after the Olympic with that metal show with Executioner. I didn't think that you had gone back and played three shows, but that's what I found online.
Yeah, my memory is always a little hazy, but I do know for sure that there was two shows that we played that like we flew out specifically just for one show at the Olympic Auditorium, and one of them was Suicidal headlined, and the other one,
Was it the Santa Monica
well,
Civic?
we played the Santa Monica Civic Center. That was like the '83 tour, though. That was when
That
we
was
played with
before.
MBH. Yeah, that was before.
So after the Suicidal show, you did go back to LA and play again?
We did play one last show. It was yeah, the one that Social Distortion was the headliner. I think it was supposed to be somebody else. Like it was scheduled like the week before or something. You know, I'm no historian. Like someone's going to be like, oh yeah, I know exactly what happened. But yeah, it was. I think someone else was supposed to play, and then that show got canceled or postponed for a couple of weeks or something like that. But yeah, we did come back and play with Social Distortion, and I think that was the one that people were not having it. They did not like us. The LA scene was not into us.
Yeah, you guys seem to survive the show I was at. I mean, because you know the Minutemen played before you, and
Oh, that was the first one. Definitely.
Yeah, that was the
And-
one that the Chili Peppers played.
Yeah,
And
that was the first show
yeah,
for sure.
you know
Yeah.
what's crazy, and I have to ask you about this. Someone told me that when the Chili Peppers played that show, Keith Morris was singing with them. Is
that is
that true?
correct.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, Anthony couldn't. There was something happening to Anthony. They had said that he was in jail. I'm not sure if that is exactly true, but he could not make the show. So Keith Morrison got up and sang instead.
I don't
Yeah,
know
My
why I
memory-
remember that.
I remember.
My memory of Keith Morris was that he got up and he basically said "funky chicken," and that was the lyrics, the only lyrics that he did. He just said "funky chicken." You know, that was it. That's all I
Yeah.
remember was him doing that.
It's
Yeah.
weird that I don't remember that because I was there and I remember the Red Hot Chili Peppers. I'm still
Yeah.
not a fan to this day, by the way. I don't mind saying that.
Well, I do remember getting there for at sound check, and I remember specifically Chris and I were sitting in there was in the auditorium type seating, and across the aisle is Flea, and he's playing bass, and Chris and I just looked at each other like, what the fuck, this guy's unbelievable. But yeah, I mean, I'm a huge Chili Peppers fan myself, especially the earlier stuff. But yeah, that was strange, the Keith Morris thing. I mean, he's buddies with them, so yeah, I guess it made sense.
Did you ever think that 38 years later or 37 years later we'd be sitting here talking about SSD?
Nah, not at all.
Nah, no way.
Yeah, because when you're a young kid and you're just involved in all that thing, it's just you're just living it, and it doesn't, you don't really see it for what it is. But yeah, many years later, you think, wow, it was like a movement. It was like a youth movement that a lot of kids were involved in and meant a real lot. Especially the whole straight edge movement meant a lot to a lot of kids. I mean, I hear it all the time about, oh, you saved my life, and that music was so inspiring to me and all that kind of stuff. And even to this day, I mean, we did this record signing a week or so ago, and there's like young kids coming up to us and just saying, oh my God, this thing, this record means so much. And it's hard to believe, like you say, 40 years later that people still give a shit.
Yeah, it's kind of amazing. I was in conversation with Joe Nelson about it, and just saying how great it was to get this out. And some of that is because the people who were there, they want to get a hold of it, they want to remember it. There's a little bit of reminiscing there. Then there's other people who are like, oh, I wish I had gotten that. I'm going to go finally get a listen to it. But Joe yesterday on Instagram showed a new Cream magazine that has a full page ad for SS Decontrol.
Wow.
Could you ever have imagined that a full page ad in Cream magazine for SS Decontrol? So my thing with Joe is, I'm like, does this have legs? Okay, so we have these people that we know would be into it, but are there? Maybe there is a new generation of kids that would be like, hey, this is cool. This is where it came from. So I'm kind of interested to see what else it brings up. You know what I mean? If it actually does speak to other kids. I know that there's definitely punk rock kids out there that it speaks to, but I think it's almost like it has a whole new chance. There's a whole new opening, and it isn't just Trust is making it so that it isn't just a vanity remember when project. They're actually pushing it forward to have hardcore be recognized as a part of American music, the American history of music. And part of me is blown away because it was 40 years ago, and yeah, here we are talking about it. That's incredible. I mean, it's pretty amazing, and it's great that Trust stepped up.
With all the bands that have covered Glue, you can only think this is going to get bigger when Get It Away comes out. I mean, because Glue has been like youth of today. Don't they play that every time, every show now? I mean,
yeah, you mentioned that that is probably the song that everybody knows, and yes, it does get covered a lot. I've seen lots of videos of people covering it.
Did you see the one where it's an all Asian group? I can't remember. I don't know their name, but there's an all Asian audience and it's an all
Is that
Asian
right?
group playing Glue.
I haven't seen that, but I did see this girl, this young girl, on YouTube doing like a cover of it, like playing all the Francois parts. It was it was pretty interesting. Like
Oh,
that is
no
a trip.
kidding.
I mean, she looked like she was like 15 or something like that. So, like you say, this new audience it's wild. Like I said, never would have imagined that anybody would have given a shit 40 years later.
I was going to ask you about Newberry Comics because I didn't make it there, but I heard it was amazing. I also heard that Springer and Al, Al didn't beat Springer up or anything. So that must have made it a good night, right?
Yeah, it was. That was the first time the four of us, three of us have gotten together at various times, but never all four of us together in the same room. And in fact, we did a little interview that day, and yeah, I mean, it's certainly no secret that the relationship that Alan Springer have, it gets talked about a lot, but yeah, they were fine. They're the bottom line is we did something together, many years ago that was kind of special. And so, there's going to be that lifelong bond between us. I'll always remember these guys as, the ones that I did this crazy shit with when I was a kid that
Yeah.
literally has changed my life. I mean, like I said, I wouldn't know the people that I know today. I wouldn't have never met my wife and many, many people in my life that are super important to me. I met because of this band. So yeah, it's pretty special.
Chris, were you surprised about the Newberry Comics turnout?
Oh, I exceeded all expectations, really. And some of that was because of the day it was, a day before Thanksgiving. It was a rainy day. I was like, oh, this could be tough. But it was really, really surprising and so cool to walk into the store and just see a line of people, waiting to come up and everybody just seemed really excited about it, and different people had different stories about you know the effect it had on them when they were younger, or what it was, or even meeting some kids. Um, it really was a great day, and I'm sure Alan Springer getting along helped out a little bit.
Yeah.
I think they have a story themselves, the two of them, and it was great to see everybody together. Actually, it was great to get together, and I think everybody um, really enjoyed being able to do that. And like Jamie said, 40 years later, I mean, not a whole lot of bands can sit uh, on the same couch 40 years later and live through it. So I feel like we're pretty lucky that we could do that, and it is amazing. What from friends to music. I mean, I played music in all kinds of different bands, and the coolest people are the ones who are like, "Oh yeah, you were in SSD Control," and I was like, "Man, yep, that's right. That's where it all started." So yeah, I was blown away by how many people showed up that day. It was really great. It was a lot of fun.
Now I know Jamie's doing the long wait now. Are you playing these days?
Not really playing. I do play with a band called Trusty Sidekick, and it's a bunch of musicians here in town. It's we never rehearse. We just show up at the gig, and we know the songs because we've learned them over a long period of time. And but it's just every couple of months I go out and play. Um, some of it has to do with my hands. I have arthritis pretty bad, which unfortunately, drumming is the one place
Ugh.
where it really affects me. Other things in life, I can grin and bear it, but drumming, if I can't hold on to the stick, I'm gonna hit somebody in the head with it. Um, so I'm not playing out as much, but I do at home. I play a lot of guitar at home, and I get a drum set and set up, and music is a part of my everyday life, so that'll never go away. I definitely have been sitting down at the drums a little bit more because we had been talking about maybe playing, and I I don't know how the hell I played that music. I listen back to it now, and I'm like, holy shit, what the hell was I doing? So it would take some some calisthenics, actually, some exercising in order to get myself back in shape to be playing that record. But
Yeah,
I'll get there.
that was going to be my last question, really, because if Al is able to get through all his health issues and everything, because I know he'll probably want to do it, do you think it can happen? I mean, do you think that SSD will actually play a show?
I don't know if you
Go ahead.
go ahead, Jamie.
All right. I was going to say, I don't know that would play a set, but I could see us, if everyone's feeling it, playing 4 or 5 songs at some event or something.
That's all you got to do, really.
That was I think the vision of us ever playing again was 3 or 4 or 5 songs, whatever it is. I see that maybe happening. We'll see what time brings.
Yeah. It's really a matter of seeing how things go for all of us. But I'm sure we'd like to do something special, and we've talked about a couple different ideas. So we're again, like Jamie said, we're hoping to have something a little bigger party when we get it away out there. So.
I do have another question, actually. Is Trust having you guys go out and do any promo anywhere, or did they just come to Boston and have you do the promo there?
At this point, that was the only promo. I mean, they're taking care of it on their end as far as media promo and stuff like that. Maybe something might happen with Get It Away. We talked about maybe doing something at the Punk Rock Museum next year after it comes out. They seemed open to something like that. So we'll see. But there's no plans, nor is there any sort of demand on their part to oh yeah, you guys got to go out and promote this thing. They're not like that at all. Our relationship with Trust has been unbelievably great. I mean, Joe and all the guys, Matt, they're such nice guys, and it's really a passion project for them. They, like I think Chris mentioned, they want to just preserve this American art form that they're afraid that a lot of us people our age now that we're all in our 50s and 60s and whatever, people starting to drop, and eventually this will go away if and 40 years, 50 years from now, will anybody remember this scene? Will it have legs? But that's, I think, their desire. In fact, Joe mentioned something that eventually they would like to maybe create some sort of archive in a museum or something, Smithsonian or something like that, where it's preserved forever.
Well, I'm really excited about all of this, and thank you guys, man, for coming on the show, because I think this is fantastic. You guys deserve this. The band is definitely one of the greatest, hardcore bands ever. So thank you very much.
Thanks, man.
Right on.